All right, should we start? It's noon. I think there are going to be many more people joining us, and also we will send a copy of this webinar out tomorrow. But um, welcome everyone to Women Make Movies. My name is Cynthia Kane, and I work with Barbara Gamashi and Laura Saladin in the Production Assistance Program, and we produce workshops and webinars for not only the Women Make Movies community, but community of independent filmmakers, both fiction and documentary across the world. And today we have a very special webinar with Front Row Insurance. This is something we've never done before, but certainly very, very important. It's a really great skill building webinar. And also we're gonna, Stacey is, and our special guest, STACIE O'BEIRNE, who is from Front Row, is also going to talk about COVID, because they're one of the few companies that actually addresses COVID and will potentially cover it. But Stacey will talk about all of that. But first, a quick land acknowledgement, which we've started recently at Women Make Movies, partially because I'm part Native American. I'm in the Adirondacks for a couple of days working. And I just want to acknowledge this is the land of the Mohican peoples and the Iroquois. So, and it's beautiful up here. And if you hear a few birds in the background, they are real birds, yes. But back in New York City next week. And without further ado, I would like to welcome Stacey. Stacey, welcome to Women Make Movies, the very first time we've done any kind of webinar like this. So we're thrilled to have you.
Thank you. I hopefully we'll get through this. What we like to do is go through the different coverages that we're going to address, and then you can, as we go, you can type in your questions, and at the end, Cynthia will go through and we'll do a Q&A. Just a little bit of background. I've been doing film production insurance specifically for 31 years. I've worked on everything from studios like Time Warner to networks like Discovery, thousands of independent films, documentaries, big ad agency conglomerates for TV commercials. So I pretty much thought I had seen everything in 31 years until 2020 hit this year, which I don't think any of us would have ever predicted that we would have seen this in our lifetime, what we're going through. So I've been through earthquakes, hurricanes, 9/11, riots, everything you can think of. This was not on my radar at all, COVID. So we'll touch base on COVID because it is an ever-changing issue in the insurance industry. And I know that with the film production, a lot of our documentary producers are moving back into production. Some programs that had coverage in place prior to March are starting to film because they don't have exclusions under their existing annual programs, some networks and things like that. But it is an ever-changing issue. The biggest hurdle we have right now are bonded films, and we'll get into that a little bit later. So we're going to touch base on the different types of, these are all different types of policies. The production package and E&O are probably the biggest that we'll spend the most time on. Production package covers a lot of different subsections in that policy, and we'll go through all of those. And that's where the meat of your insurance is going to be for any type of production. And we'll go through a little bit on each of the other ones that are a little bit more self-explanatory. So the next several slides are all going to be what's under this production package policy. So you have cast coverage, negative film, faulty stock, prop sets, wardrobe, miscellaneous equipment, third-party property damage, extra expense, office contents, and money and currency. These are all subsections of the production package, and we're going to go through a little detail on each one. So cast coverage, most documentaries don't purchase it unless it's a specific person that they may want to cover, maybe a director if it's required by distribution. But cast coverage is definitely done on feature films and TV series, and it provides coverage for your extra expenses or net loss sustained due to the death, injury, or illness of an insured artist or director. And most policies include kidnap and family bereavement. Now, this slide was done pre-COVID, so family bereavement is not even being offered on cast coverage right now, and of course there's COVID exclusions on this. The majority of the COVID claims that we saw were cast coverage and civil authority, which we'll get into in a minute. Essential element cast coverage is a contractual requirement from a distributor that names a talent that must be in the completed film for them to take delivery. So there's usually an additional charge, and there's extensive medical exams that go with this. So it's not just a blood pressure, temperature reading, and pulse. It's, this treadmill, full blood screen panels, things like that require on this. And in order to purchase essential element cash coverage, there has to be a contract with a distributor requiring it. And what that will do is allow the film to be abandoned if they can't deliver it to the network. If say you've got Tom Cruise in a film, he's going to be an essential element, and if he dies, that movie's gone. So it would pay those abandonment costs too. Another issue that goes with cash coverage is stop date issues, meaning that a talent wants to be released right when they finish filming, and the insurance policies all require there to be a 2-week gap in between the last day of filming and when they can go on to their next project, or contractually go on to their next project. And that allows for any reshoots or filming that needs to take place because of delays in the production during the regular production period. You don't want to lose that talent and then have the insurance pay. They're not going to do that. They have to have a 2-week gap in their contract. So negative film is an archaic term, but it's still on the policies. And what that is the destruction of the physical loss or damage to the raw tape film stock. Now would be hard drives, cards, things like that. It also extends to animation, and the cells is in there. I don't know that cell works is done anymore, but the computer-generated stuff would all be included in the negative film. And again, this is for direct physical loss or damage. Back in the day, it would be, somebody's carrying the tin of film. They stop to get a burger, and somebody steals it out of the back seat of their car. It would pay the reshoot cost. Now it's more of somebody losing a stack of cards, or somebody stealing them, same type of thing, or a fire that destroys them, and you have to go reshoot. Faulty stock kind of goes hand in hand with the negative. It's really that you have bad faulty stock. So you're back in the day, it used to be a scratched film. Then you don't realize it until you've gone to look at the day's shooting. Now it would be the same thing. You've got a faulty hard drive, faulty card, and you have to reshoot because of that. It also will cover, some policies will extend to cameraman errors. This came about a lot with when everything was switching over to digital, and people not understanding, how to manipulate and do the correct use of the cameras. So that's what's covered here. The next couple slides are pretty self-explanatory. This is just damage to your prop sets and wardrobe. So it's physical damage for which you're legally liable. And the same with equipment. It covers all of the camera, lens, lighting equipment, grip equipment. And again, that's for physical damage to the equipment. Most policies include the auto physical damage in this also. Third-party property damage is really just damage to your locations. Some people think that the general liability policy picks up that, but it doesn't, because the property that you're filming at is now in your care, custody, control. It's not a third-party property anymore. So this is it's not a property that you don't have control of. Third-party property damage, again, really just extends to your locations. I've used this slide because I've seen this about a dozen times where the camera trucks park on the lawn, and when they leave, or it rains, and when they leave, they've torn up the lawn. Floors getting scratched, walls getting dinged. Those are the typical types of claims you see under third-party property damage. Extra expense. This is where the delays in production come in. So it would follow your equipment. You're out shooting remote. You only have one camera. It gets dropped and broken. Now you have to shut down for the day and shoot and get a camera the next day. It's paying those extra expenses you incur. Same thing. You've got a fire location. Now you've got to move to a different location. It's picking up all those extra expenses you incur. There's a lot of extensions under this. It's not necessarily for physical damage to your property, and that's civil authority, which is where most of the COVID claims came in. All the permits were pulled, city shut down, so that was just a complete action of the government that shut you guys down. Ingress, egress is the inability to get into or off of your location. This happens, I've seen it like in Malibu where you've got a rock slide. Maybe you're filming on the beach, but you can't get there because there's a landslide or rock slide. Imminent peril is you are out filming and something looks like it's going to occur that would put your crew and your equipment and property in danger. Flash flood is one of them I've had. Lightning storms coming in. So that's the type of thing that we usually see for imminent peril. Power interruption is exactly what it says. You've got an interruption to power to your location, shuts you down. And a lot of policies will include strike coverage, but that's not union or guild strikes in the industry. So like in New York, when we had the MTA shut down and it caused some issues with permits and things, that would have been covered because it's not an entertainment guild or union. These are pretty self-explanatory. Office content, it's covering your, the stuff you take out to locations or out shooting with your laptops and office type content for physical damage. And then money, same thing, theft of money, actual cash and money and currency. And now we'll get into COVID. So what I was saying earlier, I don't think everybody was on the line. Most of my documentary clients are back up and filming in some small manner. The feature films, if it's private funding, we're seeing those start up. And there is a COVID exclusion on all insurance companies across the board now on CAS coverage, especially on CAS, but it's all across the board on the production package policy. The rates for feature films have gone up at least 25% from some companies. Some are kind of staying a little less than that. But protocols are a must because in most insurance policies, you have what's called a due diligence clause. And so if you go out and you're not following what the protocols are for 1, a city, 2, a state, or 3, the guilds and unions that you're part of, the insurance companies could come back and say you didn't do due diligence and your insurance coverage could cease. So we'll do Q&A on this, I'm sure. This is like the hot issue. And the other issue with COVID is when you have a film that's financed and bonded, the bond companies are having the same issue on their end, and they want the insurance to pick up as much as we can from our end. And with the COVID exclusions from both ends, I think the bonded films are having a little bit more tough time getting up and going. Okay, the next policy, excuse me, take a drink. The next coverage is general and auto liability, and that's for bodily injury and property damage to third parties. Example, filming in New York City, you've got all your lighting and camera equipment out. Somebody drops something on someone, or somebody trips over an electrical cord. That's general liability for bodily injury to a third party. The same thing with an auto; it would be for bodily injury to a third party or damage to their car, that type of thing. Workers' compensation, we're going to touch on a little bit more in depth too. I think everybody kind of understands what that is. It is required by all the states, and it provides coverage for medical, disability, and death benefits. People are under the misconception that if somebody's hired as an independent contractor by a 1099, you're not required to provide coverage on them, and that's false. That is a tax issue, not an employer's law issue. If you tell someone what time to show up on the job and what their job duties are, you're required to provide workers' comp on them. A true independent contractor would be your accountant that sits in his own office and does things on his own time. A lawyer, those are true independent contractors. But somebody showing up to the set at a call time, they're an employee by workers' comp laws. Umbrella liability is all it's doing is increasing the limits for your general, auto, and workers' comp liability limits. So the typical is anywhere from $1 million to a $4 million policy. And the only time most smaller productions don't use this unless they need it for a specific location. Guild union travel accident is accidental death and dismemberment that's required by most of the guilds and union contracts. So the policy doesn't have a set limit. It's whatever is in that contract with that guild or union. They would pay those limits. But it also is extended to non-union employees for the benefit limit of $50,000. And not every production buys this, only when it's required by one of the guilds or unions if it's a union show. Now, these are the special risks where extra coverage is needed. Most of the time, we'll need special applications for these. So weather would be, rain if you don't want it to rain. I've also bought weather for it to snow in Chicago, where they wanted the actual real snow on the ground. So that we bought weather insurance for it, for January for there to be snow on the ground. Aircraft liability is completely special, and that includes drones now too. Drones are now governed by the FAA, so special coverage is required. Back 10 years ago, we were able to get liability coverage sometimes under the basic coverages, but not anymore. It's special coverage, it has to be purchased. Watercraft, it depends. If you're in a rowboat, we can usually get it covered under the basic policies. If you're using big yachts and things, or speedboats, we definitely have to buy separate watercraft coverage. Railroads, sometimes we need special coverage, sometimes you don't, but we need to get the data in. I'll tell you, if you film in New York City, you're going to need special coverage. It's not necessarily cheap, and it doesn't matter if you're going onto the subways in New York City. If you step 1 foot on their property, they will require that you have rower protective liability of $6 million. So, I mean, I had a Beyonce music video, and she never went even past the turnstile. She was walking up the stairs out of the subway in a video shoot, and they required us to have that coverage. Stunts and pyrotechnics, that's just standard. Any, car chases, blowing up, stunt activities have to be declared. Sometimes there's additional charges. Sometimes it's just doing a risk assessment to get them approved. And then foreign shoots are always special coverage we need to get if you're filming outside of the U.S. or Canada. The basic liability covers U.S. and Canada only. So now on to E&O. E&O provides legal liability coverage for copyright infringement, libel, slander, defamation of character, invasion of privacy. Most of the clients don't buy this until they're ready to distribute. But I always suggest on certain productions, if it's a big film that's going to get a lot of publicity while it's filming, you want it. Reality television needs E&O when they start filming because you've got invasion of privacy issues. So I always have it while they're filming, or if it can wait until when they're getting ready to distribute. So the process, we always need an application. We can't just quote it. It's about a 7-8 page application that has to be done. It's best that you have an attorney review the clearance procedures that are part of the application. And that most of the applications actually have a page of just clearance, things that you should be aware of. And a copyright report is needed on scripted shows. Title report and opinion letter is needed for most. Some insurance companies right now will give title coverage if it's innocuous without a report and an opinion letter. It saves you guys $1,000 to not have to do that. Fair use is definitely always in documentaries. We're doing it. I do it probably on a good 90% of the E&Os I work on right now with dealing with fair use. So fair use is a doctrine in the law of the United States that permits limited use of copyrighted material without having to first acquire permission from the owner. Fair use is one of the limitations to copyright intended to balance the interests of copyright holders with the public interest in the wider distribution and use of the creative work by allowing as a defense to copyright infringement claims certain limited uses that might otherwise be considered infringement. These are the 4 factors: the purpose and the character of the use, including whether such use is of a commercial nature or is it a non-profitable educational purpose. What is the nature of the copyrighted work? The amount and sustainability of the portion used in relation to the copyrighted work as a whole, and the effect of the use upon the potential market for or value of the copyrighted work. So it's not just a checklist. They have to be analyzed on an individual level, and that's why it is mandatory that a clip log be done by an attorney for each clip that's not cleared, not licensed, and then that attorney needs to give an opinion as to why it would fall into those category of fair use. And that is needed. We usually do the E&O policies prior to getting the fair use. That can be added on at a later time. It doesn't have to be submitted with the application. So now completion bonds. It is a written contract that guarantees that a motion picture will be finished and delivered on schedule and within a budget. So this is where COVID's coming in, is because we've now got the hottest issue of shutting productions down that went on for 3 and 4 months that we can't necessarily get too much coverage for, and the bond company can't. So it's holding up some of these financed films for this reason. Now, Front Row is one of the only brokers that I'm aware of. We have a COVID option for cast and civil authority, but it's a maximum limit of $2 or $3 million, depending on where you're filming, and what your budget is if we can get it up to the $3 million. So it's something, but if you've got a $10 or $15 million feature film, I don't think the bond and the financiers are going to go for that smaller limit. So that's where we are. So now we can open up for questions and answers.
Great. Thank you so much, Stacie, and that was a great. I'm gonna start off with a question. It came up yesterday because I worked on a film, a documentary that is starting to. It's been in a lot of festivals, a lot of virtual festivals, and it's starting to. We're starting to get people wanting to acquire the film, and it's an American-made film, basically an American story. But ITV in Italy wants to purchase it. And there was discussion with the sales agent, with the executive producer, the director, another producer yesterday about whether or not you would need E&O for ITV. We understand we definitely need it for the US and Canada, possibly the UK. This would be our first sale. What's your opinion on that?
Well, it wouldn't matter because the E&O policies are worldwide. So if you're placing it for the U.S. and Canada anyway, it would extend to the Italian distribution, and it's completely normal, especially on big finance films with the bond. You've got your foreign sales up front, so we're adding, Germany and Italy and France, and it could be even Saudi Arabia. We get them all up front. And they're all added as an additional insurance to the E&O. It doesn't matter what country they're in. We can only.
So it's best just we get it in worldwide for perpetuity, as soon as you're ready to do your first sale.
Yes.
To trigger that. Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you. Here's another question from Tiffany. What are the liability concerns if you're working outside public art focus, all external?
Well, you've got more of a liability exposure. So if you're filming outdoors and not in a closed set location, then your general liability exposure increases. But if it's some art installations and things like that, that's not the same as filming. But we do a special event liability for those type of things also.
Okay. Great. Someone's asking, is this also in video? Yeah, we're filming this. It's being recorded today through Front Row, and we will send it out from Women Make Movies either tomorrow or the following day. So you'll get a copy of this. If you don't want to take notes right now, you'll get a copy of this webinar. So yes. I don't have sound. Liz, I'm not sure how to help you with that. So yes, so Nikki is asking, I can't see the speaker. I am signed in as audio only. So the reason we're not using Zoom today, and we're using a GoToWebinar that from Front Row Insurance, is because Front Row has some very important confidential information about many high-level people, actors, directors, producers. Stacie, do you want to explain a little bit?
Yeah.
So we didn't.
When all of this started back in March, we were talking about Zoom, but there were security issues with Zoom, and we can't have. We've got very secure systems because we get cast medicals in with people, actually actors and directors' medical information. So we have to take all the precautions we can, and Zoom is not secure enough for us to use. So that's why we use GoToWebinar. We've used this internally for years. But Zoom we talked about it, but again, Zoom does not have the security measures that we needed.
Great, thank you. And Mindy and Deborah, are you able to hear now? Some people are saying they're having problems with the audio, so just let us know. From Susan Sandler, can you estimate cost for E&O insurance? Often when we're applying for, grants and or equity investments, or some people want to see our fundraising strategy. and it's great to get a sense or estimate a cost for what E&O, title, title search, etc. Copyright report.
I can tell you if it falls within a certain parameter, I can usually give you a pretty good estimate. But when it comes to scripted, like feature films, it's going to go by budget, how it's going to be distributed. If it's a documentary that's under $1 million and you need the basic 1 million, 3 million limits, that usually generally is if it's not a high risk documentary, the subject matter also matters. But just a basic documentary, so say for a PBS or something, would be probably about $3,000, maybe a little less if it's on our program, which we're working on.
And do you require to look at it yourself? Do you look at things during a rough cut or someone within Front Row, like a fine cut screener? Do you look at the film before you suggest what the E&O might be, or how does that work?
No, usually it's the application process. So like I mentioned before, it's definitely the 7-page application. It goes out to the insurance companies. I usually take a look at the application myself just to make sure that there's anything missing that they'll question, and I'll let you guys know that. If it hints when you put the synopsis on the application, if there's a hint that it might be controversial, they may want to link. They may want to see it like on Vimeo or Venmo or whatever it's called to see a link. So. But it's not
Vimeo.
Vimeo. Vimeo. Thanks. Venmo's the payment platform.
Exactly.
It happens about once a month where I'll get a documentary in where the insurance company wants to view it. And what they usually do is all of the insurance companies that write E&O, they have lawyers in their department. So they're the ones that handle all the claims because they're usually lawsuits on E&O. It's not just somebody, that tripped and fell and wants $5,000 for their broken leg. It's usually it's copyright infringement. You've got lawyers involved. So those lawyers are the claims people. So if it's something controversial, they'll review it with one of their in-house lawyers to see if they will give it terms or conditions or if they feel comfortable that it's innocuous. So it's usually the insurance company that does it. We're the broker.
Yeah, so approximately $3,000, but it can go up depending on the risks that are,
that's a basic 1 hour, 90-minute documentary, maybe 2-hour documentary, but on bears, something innocuous. When it comes to, if you're doing a $20 million feature, it's not going to be $3,000.
Exactly, yeah. And documentary, if it's about a controversial issue or something that could go up to even $10,000, $12,000 or something.
It could. It also depends on the limits required. So if you're doing something for HBO requires 5 million limits. That's not the basic limit. So your premium is going to go up because now you're 5 times the limit that we would normally have on a basic documentary. So it depends on the
Absolutely.
So that could go up. Say a normal $3,000 documentary for HBO, because now they want 5 million. It could go up to $9,000.
So it's so can you explain a little bit the 1 in 3? What is it, 2 and 5?
The basic limits is $1 million per occurrence and a $3 million policy aggregate. So the maximum they would ever pay out for all claims would be $3 million, but it's $1 million per occurrence or per claim. And that's the basic one. The basic deductibles are either 10,000 or 25,000. Those are the deductible options for E&O. And again, it usually comes down to what your distributor will accept and not accept. And then it usually goes up from there. The next basic limits are usually a 3 million, 5 million, or a 5 million, 5 million. And those are the ones we deal with on a daily basis. Those are the 3 options that are usually in a contract from a distributor.
That's wonderful. Thank you. And that would be explained in your deliverables, whatever broadcaster, cable company, or SVOD that you're working with. Here's another from Roberto Colangelo. Hi, Roberta. I'm the chair of producing for New York Film Academy. Eventually, we will resume our students' productions. They usually do not hire SAG actors. We are instructing them with safety protocols that are based on Safe Way Forward and state and county rules. What do they need to provide in order to get insurance?
Well, if it's student films, a lot of the universities have programs for their students. If you don't, then you would send them to us. We would do what we call a short-term policy, because they're usually going to film over a weekend. It's not going to be more than 30 days. And we can get them basic general liability. We can get them a small equipment limit that they can go rent cameras. We would give them, we would give them options, but there is short-term availability for production insurance. And we do that with students a lot. We just do it with, like on the micro budget web shoots, short shoots. We do those all the time.
Great,
so
thank you.
Yeah, they would call us. We would get them the application they need, and we would get them. It's an online platform, so we usually can quote it within 30 minutes for them.
Great, and Stacie's contact information is here in front of us right now. Thank you. And here's a question from Nikki. Can you tell us, please, if production companies are able to be insured right now?
Yes, absolutely. But there's a COVID exclusion. They're all, it's across the board. They're all worded differently. So, like Fireman's Fund got a communicable disease exclusion. Chubb is a communicable disease exclusion. One Beacon is, they're calling it bacteria and virus exclusion. And then Hiscox is doing pandemic exclusion.
Wow.
So they're all worded it differently. But in other words, you have no coverage for COVID. It's just how they've decided to put them on the wording on their policy. So they're all different. But yeah, you don't have any COVID coverage. And again, the majority of the claims we saw were civil authority claims, meaning that the permits were pulled. So some of my clients aren't as concerned with it because they can do not commando shooting, but they're not out filming in downtown, Manhattan. They're filming at somebody's ranch and with two production crew. So those type of shoots, I think, will be fine even with COVID. A lot of my clients didn't even have claims, even because they were 1 and 2, 3 day shoots. But the feature film side is where it's really difficult right now, and especially if it's bonded. Some of our lower budget films and $2 million films, they're filming without COVID. They just get their 10-day shoot in and be done with it. But yeah, coverage is there. It's just there's no COVID coverage.
And is it a law now that everybody that goes into production or is filming, et cetera, have some kind of protocol for their production company? Is that ever asked for, or?
I don't think it's a law. I think that, as you know, being in New York and I'm in New Jersey too, I think the state film commissions have guidelines that you need to follow. And again, when it comes back to insurance, they're just going to look that you've done due diligence too. So even though there's no COVID coverage, if something else happens and you weren't diligent with what the protocols were, they could negate coverage. So, and it's so complicated. I told you I've got a huge file of just nothing but protocols, and they change constantly. And you've got different ones for California than you have for New York. New York, you've got New York State, then you've got New York City. So, it's just piecing together it goes by where you're filming and what those rules are at that point. I don't know that they're laws. People are supposed to be wearing masks inside, and then some people don't. So I don't know that they're going to arrest you, but you can get fined, maybe.
Great. And then tomorrow, when we send a copy of this webinar to you all, we'll send you some copies of some links to, if you haven't set up your protocols yet, then we will send you some links to look at, so that, and some documents where you can start thinking about what those protocols will be when you resume production, because it's very, very important. And of course, none of us want to get anyone sick, and certainly we don't want to have anyone perish from this pandemic. So thanks. From Megan, will this webinar be available to us afterwards? Yes, it will be. We'll send it out tomorrow or the next day. This is from Beth. I delivered an E&O certificate to our films distributor, and they came back and asked the broker to add rights period endorsement to our policy. Can you explain what that is and why it's not automatically included?
Yes, I can. Most policies are E&O policies are for a 3-year term. So say you're in filming right now and you're going to get your E&O. it'll be for 3 years from the date you bind coverage. Most distributors want 3 years from delivery of the production, or they want 5 years or 7 years. So we can do what's called a rights period endorsement. And what that does is extends for whatever's in that contract for that. So I'm saying say HBO requires for 5 years. We endorse HBO's contract onto the policy, and HBO would get coverage for a full 5 years, not just the 3 years that it's on the policy term. And the reason we need the contract is because that's how the coverage is extended. The actual contract is endorsed onto the policy. So it specifically states the term of coverage for HBO based on the contract dated so-and-so with so-and-so and HBO will give them the term that's required in this contract. So the actual physical contract is endorsed to the policy. So it needs to be a fully executed agreement. So that's why it can't be added up front because it's done by endorsement. Specific contracts are endorsed to give them the coverage that they require in their agreement. There's no charge. There's no charge for that. We do them all the time, and it's not additional premium. So it's just giving that distributor their required term that's in the agreement.
Great. This is also from Tiffany. She's going back to her film, which is about the installation process for public art. So it would be actually filming the installation process in process as they're putting up this work of public art.
Okay, that would be no problem. It would just be a basic general liability for filming or whatever other coverage you need if you're renting equipment. And if it's something like that, that would probably fall within a short term. I can't imagine that you're filming an installation. It would probably be under 30 days. So we can do a short term for that. Would definitely be the general liability for sure that you would need.
Great, thank you. Here's from Anam. I also have an E&O question about an indie low-budget documentary that's working toward a global digital buyout. The music on the film is becoming difficult to license because it's from a country where there's no proper documentations or chain of title over the tracks. The music is essential to this film as it's a dance film. How do you approach getting E&O in that scenario? Great question.
That is a good question, and I've had this happen once, but we got around it, and it's really going to be probably similar to the fair use issue, is to have an opinion letter from an attorney. And, that attorney may need to check into what the laws are in the country that the music's coming from, and specifically advise the insurance company why you can't get it and why it really isn't needed if they don't have those type of laws in that country. So I don't have a specific answer. There would be a lot more detailed and work going into this, but it's something we can help with for sure. It would be getting the application, and again, probably the easiest would be to get an attorney opinion letter, just detailing exactly what it is that you're not able to get, why you can't get it, and why you don't think it's necessary.
Great. Does that help, Anam? And also, Stacey, you're available to answer these questions if someone wants to set up a call with you. Is that
my email
correct?
address is to shoot me a question, call me. I am working remotely, so if you call and I don't answer and you go, hi, this is the O'Beirnes, that's why, because my phone's forwarded to my house.
That's great. Great. So Anam, if you have further questions, feel free to get in touch with Stacey. This is from Kelly. Maybe I heard this incorrectly. Did you say E&O coverage is not available for low budget films?
Oh, sure. Yeah, sure it is. Yeah, it's available for all films. I don't know.
Yes, and you do need it if you're going to broadcast in the U.S., Canada, UK, and other countries. Many other countries now require it. So, but especially the U.S.
Right. But no, we can get it. The low budget, even a low budget scripted movie, we could probably get in the $3,000 range, especially if it's not going full theatrical. If it's going to do limited, and then maybe a VOD or something, those are usually in that $3,000 range too. If it's $1 million or under, maybe even a $2 million film, we can probably get in that $3,000 range also, like same as a documentary.
Great. And Joanne is asking how much of this actually applies to documentary filmmaking and film. I think, you do need production insurance, whether you're making a documentary or a scripted film. And so it very much applies. Stacey, do you want to comment on that? And
yeah, you have the same exact exposures. I'll be honest, the only really big difference between the policies for TV series and film versus documentaries is cast coverage. Because most documentaries
and it may be more expensive because
it is definitely more expensive.
And it may be more expensive because documentaries are generally lower budgets.
Lower budget, and there is a lower rate because you're not providing one of the highest risk coverages, which is cast coverage, to shut you down. So again, you've got a feature film, and you've got Tom Cruise in it. That's a huge risk, and it happened. He has to do his own stunts, and he got hurt. And that Mission Impossible shut down for 2 months. That's a huge exposure. So when you're doing cast coverage, it definitely increases the rate. But the other coverages are all the same. Doesn't matter if it's a documentary or feature film. It's just the documentaries on a smaller scale.
Great. So it applies to all kinds of filmmaking.
Absolutely. The same coverage regardless.
Here's another question from Carol. I was recently asked for workers' compensation for post-production. Can you give me an idea of how much this costs for budget purposes?
I wish I could. It's all governed by the states, so every state has different rates, and it goes by payroll. So I'd have to know the state and payroll, and we have to submit to the insurance company. I cannot get workers' compensation on its own. It has to go along, with the other coverages. None of our film markets will write workers' comp by itself. Most states, though, do have a state fund. So you can go like California has a workers' comp fund. If you're only doing post-production in California and all you need is workers' comp, you'll probably be better off going to the state fund. But I can't quote it. I can't just
to get to that. Yeah, and to get to that state fund, would you go to ca.gov or something like that, or
you can type in New York state. If it was California, type in California Workers' Comp Fund, and it'll come up. Utah Workers' Comp Fund, New York Workers' Comp Fund, and you'll find the links on them by state.
Excellent. Here's a question from Alexandra. Could you talk more about the decisions process for getting E&O during filming at a distribution, especially for documentaries? So the whole process.
If you've got some type of a controversial documentary, or you're going to be out and about where you could have some invasion of privacy issues with trying to, commando film somebody to get an interview that doesn't want to be interviewed. So it depends on how you're filming and what you're filming as to what the risk is. And that's why I said, with my clients, I talk it through with them at the beginning if it's something they think that they need. You also have trespass. Trespass is also covered under E&O. So that's why with reality shows, just think about all the cop shows and what invasion of privacy and trespass issues there are on those cop shows. So they need E&O while they're filming. So those are the two biggest, I would say, things that are covered under E&O that you would want while filming. The other issue would be working on studio films. Those are, when a big production is being filmed, like, one of the Marvel comic ones or whatever it is, that if there's a big film with a big name artist in it, it's in the tabloids that they're filming this movie. So if you think that there's a possibility that there's going to be a lot of promotional stuff going on while you're filming, then you would want E&O in place too beforehand.
But in terms of documentary, it's more that you would get this more at a fine cut, or even the complete, when you've completed the film at that point, right before you start even, some people go to festivals without E&O. Or what are your thoughts on that, Stacie? Is that a risk in and of itself to go to start, say you launch at Sundance or some other quite big festival, and it's a documentary, and you haven't triggered your E&O policy yet? What are your thoughts on that?
Most of the E&O policies right now have what's called prior acts coverage. So that covers festivals while you're shooting and all of that. But if a claim came in prior to the E&O being in place, you wouldn't have coverage. But if a claim comes in after the fact, or an airing at a festival, that the festival was prior to you binding coverage, it would be covered. But again,
that's great to know.
Yeah. But it's still, again, it depends on how risky your shoot is. And if you feel it's not risky, 95% of our documentary producers do not buy E&O until they're almost ready for airing or distributing. But a lot of them will get it prior to film festivals too.
Okay. And then the case of where you should get it earlier is something like it's a very high risk film, say you're maybe in a war zone or you're dealing with some very highly controversial characters or figures. It might behoove the production to get E&O in advance.
Correct.
I guess that's my question. Yeah. Okay.
And it really, it is going to be, it can be subjective, but again, that's what I said. I talk my client through what the issues would be with what they're doing. And that's not my decision to buy it or not buy it. It's really just to advise as to why either you probably don't need it, or here's why I feel you do need it. And that's going to be based on an individual issue, production issue.
That's great. It's great that you talk it through it with your clients. I love that. I thank you in advance. Here's a question from Suzanne. Protocols. Does the insurance company need to see the written list of protocols for a production up front to get these quotes?
No.
How detailed do the protocols be? You don't need to see them. Okay.
No, we don't need them up front. They're going to want, they're really highlighting the due diligence that you're abiding by whatever is in place for where you're filming. So if there's no city or state guidelines and it's fully open to you, then, should you still do masks? Should you still do cleaning? Probably. But if you are governed by certain protocols, they're going to want to see that you've done those things. Like I said, I'm seeing feature film budgets, with $50,000 to $100,000 just in COVID stuff, because they've got it, testing. The testing. They're testing 2 weeks prior to shoot. They're locking down 2 weeks prior to the shoot. They're testing, 3 times during the shoot. I've got one where they're having a stand-in. The lead actress's husband's going to do the stand-in for a kissing scene. So they're doing all kinds of fun stuff.
Ah, interesting.
So just to get, put a wig on him, whatever it is, to make him look from one angle like the lead actor. But they're using the lead actress's husband to do the kissing scene. So everybody's getting very
interesting.
Very creative on how they're doing this.
It's time to be very creative. And of course, with a smaller budget and working in documentary where you're going to have a tiny crew, often a very small crew, sometimes not, the protocols will be somewhat different, but certainly social distancing. A lot of people are filming on Zoom with extra, GoPros and different kinds of cameras. And I was talking to a production company last week, and they had for some interview sequences, they have something that they've created called production in a box. Well, they'll send it to the subject. They will have someone come out, like a PA or someone else, come out, set this up, open the box, set up this, set up the lights, the camera, a really good mic. Make sure they're masked and gloved while they're doing this. They leave. The subject sits in a chair with whatever background they've set up, and they do the interview, which is controlled by the production company. Either could be in New York, LA, Chicago, anywhere. So that's also, people are being very creative and very. So that's another thing. Production in a box.
Same. I've got the GoPros going out everywhere. And then my one client was finishing up almost a 2-year documentary, and the last of the filming was going to be over this summer. So instead of flying to 6 different locations around the country, they rented an RV, and they've got their 2 teenage kids with them, and the husband and wife are going to go finish up their filming on the RV.
Great. So, wow.
They're going to spend a month on the road, traveling to the 6 different cities they needed to go to get the last of their interviews and stuff in, socially distancing the interviews, and instead of flying all over the place, they're locked in an RV, driving across the country.
Great. A learning experience for the kids too, which is great. Hopefully great. Here's a question from Kathy. Would you mind going into more detail about the application process for E&O?
Yeah, like I said, it's like a 7 to 8 page application, and it's project specific. So it's gonna, the beginning of the first page is all who's the named insured, so it's the production company name. Want to know what limits? Do you have a distributor? What's the title of the production? Give a synopsis of the production. Then it goes into 3 or 4 pages of just detail. Have you obtained a copyright report? Have you obtained a title report? Did you get all of his music license? Is there anybody that could claim the use of likeness in this film? So it's just clearance and specific to your production. And that's why I said there's a clearance procedures usually attached to the application. And they do want to know if you have an attorney. Some insurance companies don't like the fact if you don't have one. Some don't care if you've answered all the questions. The questions do become, the application becomes a part of the policy, and you have to sign it to get coverage. So you're verifying that everything you answered was true and correct. So that's why we can't just quote E&O coverage. But, it can be daunting, but I don't have any problem in walking through the application process. But it's something I can't complete for you. It's something you have to do on your own and sign the document.
And when we're ready to do this, do we contact you and ask for that application? Can we find it online under, frontrowinsurance.com, or how does that happen?
That's a good question. I don't know if we have one online, but my clients will usually just call me and say, okay, I'm ready for E&O, and I'll flip them over the application on email.
Great. Oh, that's good to know. Yeah, I filled out many of these, so they are kind of daunting. So it's a great, again, STACIE is there to walk you through it. And Nicole says, thank you for the video explanation. Here's a question from Mindy. Are there exceptions to the negative film loss that something has happened, say something has happened to the digital media? Let me try to say this again. Sorry for my inarticulation. Are there exceptions to the negative film loss that something that has happened to the digital media is not covered?
Well,
are there exceptions?
Every policy's got some exceptions. I'm trying to think of, I'd have to pull the policy up to look at the exclusions. Mysterious disappearance is usually not covered on any of the production coverages. So if you just say, well, you know what, shortage of inventories and other things, we don't know what happened to the camera when we went to take everything back to the vendor, this was missing. Well, no, it's got to be specific. It was stolen on this date from this place. So I don't know on a negative film, mysterious disappearance of negative would be possibly covered. You need to pinpoint when it was taken or stolen. And then it's coverage for damage to it too. So, I don't know if maybe she can give an example of something that wasn't covered and I could answer that.
Yes, is that possible that you could put a second part to this question and explain a little bit more what it is that you want specifically to be answered? That would be really great. Carol's asking, I do docu-style productions throughout the year. Could I get an umbrella coverage?
Well, the terminology for us on umbrella is really just like it's increasing your liability limits. If you're talking about an annual ongoing policy for documentary productions, absolutely. That's probably the majority of of our front row clients. I would say 50% are just ongoing, what we call DICE business, which is documentary, industrial, commercial, and educational productions. And that includes webisodes, music videos. So it's the stuff that doesn't need cast coverage. So
great. And do you also cover? Oh, sorry. Do you also cover podcasts? Because there's so many podcasts out now. So
yes, one of my colleagues has been doing them like crazy. So
that's great.
Yeah, for E&O, it's mostly for E&O though. And those type of things. And if you do just a bunch of TV commercials all year long, we can do an annualized E&O for those too. What I can't do is for like feature-length documentaries, TV series. Those all have to be project-specific feature films. But if you're doing just music videos and some webisodes and TV commercials, those can be annualized on E&O. Same with production. The production coverages can also be done annually. And all we need for those is your estimated annual gross production costs for these smaller shoots.
Great.
And then,
And just to clarify, so that's for, web shows, commercials, all kinds of those kinds of things,
yeah,
in
those
terms of
production,
production, but
the type of,
feature-length documentaries or feature-length scripted films would be done per project specific,
correct.
even for production insurance. Okay.
Yes, and because the budgets are typically longer and you're filming longer. So if you've got one documentary that's $1 million and you're going to film it and post it over an 18-month period, you need coverage separately on that production. The blanket, what we call blanket dice, is usually for those type of shoots that are under 30 to 90 days. So you do a TV commercial,
Right.
you pop those things out in 10 days from shoot to post. So that's where you can blanket annualize those. You don't need coverage for production.
Excellent. That sounds great, Carol. If that doesn't fully explain it, just ask another question. Thanks. Here's from Jenny. What's your advice to young women breaking into the production industry? Do you have any specific, you've been doing this for over, what did you say, Stacey, 30 years?
31 years a couple weeks ago in business. I started in 1989 in
Yay.
Los
Oh,
Angeles. So I'm
excellent.
actually from LA, but I migrated back to the East Coast about 21 years ago. I don't,
Great.
you know what, I wish I did. I'm not, because I'm in more of the financial side, I don't know what it is on the feet on the ground production end. I think groups like this and Women in Film, and there's a lot of women building other women up in this industry right now. That has been for the last, I would say, year or two, and I think it's getting stronger. I think that's my advice is to get involved with the organizations like this, like Women Making Movies.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I agree. And there's Women Make Movies, Women in Film, New York Women in Film, every Bay Area Women in Film. There's the Brown Girls Doc Mafia. There's a number of organizations that really help to support women, both in production and in making media of all kinds. So, but let me ask you this, Stacey. You've been in the business for some time now. Have you seen more and more women coming up as directors, producers, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think that in the last, and like I said, I'm really seeing it more the last 2 years, where there was a lot of disparity with women, and I think that the organizations are growing, the women's production organizations like this. So I am seeing more, absolutely seeing more women directors and women producers.
That's great. That's great to hear, and we still have a long way to go, but fingers crossed, we're on our way. So,
Exactly.
here's a question.
Yeah, what I'm seeing is it's moving for sure. It's not as stagnant as it was, say, 5 or 10 years ago.
Great. That's great to hear. Here's a question from Menasha. So independent film with a $20,000 budget, how much insurance for 6 actors? That's a small budget.
It is a small budget, and you're probably going to end up not wanting a full coverage of everything I just mentioned. With a budget like this, it's generally you're going to be done in under 30 days with filming, and you're only going to want coverage that you need to film. A lot of these type of productions will only buy general liability so they can get onto a location, some equipment coverage maybe if they're renting some cameras and lenses and things like that. That's what we see a lot with budgets like this size or smaller. You're gonna buy the bare minimum. Workers' comp too, unless they've got their own. So people forget that with workers' comp that they think they don't need it, but if you're telling people when to show up, it's required. So I can't say how much insurance. I can tell you you're not going to want a full-blown production package. You're going to want the bare necessities of what you need to actually get out there and film.
Great. And Menasha, where are you? You might want to send us a quick update. Where are you filming and that kind of thing? Here's a question from Liz. The films that have been in production during COVID, do they have insurance or are they taking a risk?
Well, all the productions were shut down. So especially back towards from middle March till beginning of April, everything that we had going shut down. So all of the independent films that we had filming shut down. They've just finished, 2 of them had to go back to Mississippi and Louisiana, and they just did that. Both of them had like 4 or 5 days left of filming when they got shut down. So they picked those up. They did still have COVID coverage because their policies were still in force from January. So there was no COVID exclusions on them. The productions that we have going now that are starting to, I've got 3 in Utah back to back. One's finished, one's starting now, one starts in the middle of August. It's a program, so they have COVID coverage. The ones that don't, they're still filming. They're just doing all the protocols. Unless, again, I'm just starting to get a lot more in that haven't bound yet, but they have bonds involved. So I'm just starting to get into that bonding, bank financing feature films right now. So none of those are planning on going till October. So I think that they're hoping that things will open up. And again, we do have some coverage for COVID, just not enough to meet, a $10 million budget or anything like that. But they're with the COVID exclusions, they know that they have no coverage. They are doing what they feel that they can do to mitigate a potential loss. And so, again, those are the ones that are going in. The cast and crew have to be there 2 weeks prior to the start date, tested, lockdown, quarantined. Then they're doing all the protocols on the sets. Nobody's allowed to go out. You can't go out to dinner. You can't go to a bar. So that's what they're trying to do to mitigate anybody contacting COVID. So that's kind of what they're doing.
Great, and that really, it helps. And again, we'll send some links to protocols if you don't have them in place yet. And tomorrow with this, but very, very important, especially for documentary crews and teams, because we've got lower budgets. We can't afford to have a doctor necessarily on set, testing on set, that kind of thing. So we'll send you some more documents, links to what protocols should and can be. Here's a question from Mina. What about E&O for short films?
Sure.
A long time ago, it wasn't always required, but is it now?
I don't know. That's going to depend on the method of distribution. The distribution drives the E&O. So if you're just going to put it up on your own website and things like that, there's no requirement for you to have it. Should you have it? Probably, but it's a business decision. But again, the distribution is going to drive it, but we can do it for any type of production. Doesn't matter the size.
Great. And so when you say minutes, so say the short gets picked up by Netflix or something, they should have very specifically in their deliverables what if you do need E&O, and probably you do for something like that. But if you want to distribute it, self-distribute or something like that, you make that decision whether you think you should get E&O, if it's at safe bet, how safe you feel, and how if you feel like taking that risk. So
yeah, exactly.
So that's great. Thank you. Here's just a question from John. Is it essential now that when interviewing a subject for a documentary, the interviewees released must include a clause saying that the producer is not responsible for the interview if the interviewee contracts COVID following the interview? That's a very interesting question.
It is, and it's from our end, it's not mandatory, but I can tell you I've been seeing some different things coming through from producers as far as what they're trying to do, like this, saying we're not responsible for COVID. And then number 2, talent agreements with the cast, where they're putting stop date issues in. They're also wanting pay or play, which means that if the production shuts down, the cast gets paid regardless. So the cast is worried that, look, I'm going to take all these, this 2 months out of my time, and if you get shut down again due to COVID, I want my money. So those are some hot topics we're seeing in contracts. But from our end, it's not mandatory that you put any COVID clauses in any contracts now.
Okay, that's good. Minna, who just asked about the short film, E&O for short films, is there approximate cost? Say say it was picked up by PBS's POV or something like that. Is there an approximate cost? We talked about $3,000 for a full-length documentary, approximately, give or take. Is there for shorts? Is it?
It would maybe a couple hundred less for something real short, but you start having minimum premiums. So the absolute least I've ever seen is $2,500.
Okay, that's good, and it's good to know, so we can put that in our budget. So, thanks. Here's from Roxana. What do you suggest for those of us making small 3 to 5 day shoots, especially for short docs?
Well, those are the ones where we can do the short-term coverage. It's under, as long as it's under 30 days, it falls in those short programs, and we do those all the time. And again, for these type of productions, you're generally going to do bare bones coverage, whatever mandatory you need for locations and for vendors. But again, it's an application process. We just have to get the information from you, the exact dates of shoot, and we can usually turn the quote around in 30 minutes.
Great. And here's from Daria. I have E&O insurance with you, with Front Row Insurance. I have an additional list of insured for my distributor, who is releasing VOD in August. Would any additional COL be necessary? I'm also going to be distributed by NITA for broadcasts on public television stations. The presenting station is Northern California Public Media that has its own E&O, but should I request a COL for him and or for NITA?
I would just go ahead and send us the list of the names of each distributor or sub-distributor. There's no cost to add them as an additional insured. And they kind of are automatically on the E&O. Distributors are automatically an additional insured, but it's just cleaner if we have them endorsed onto the policy. And there's no charge for that. So we just need their full name and address.
Excellent. And I've seen even on some E&O policies, I've been asked by some of our funders to make sure that they're listed or an executive producer is listed on the E&O policy. Is that common or?
No, it's not common. I mean, the financiers for sure is. But the executive producers are really employees and are automatically covered by the policy. But I'll get requests every once in a while where the producers, when you've got like a long line of producers or even talent. So you get, an actor that's got a loan out corporation, they may want to be specifically added by endorsement also. So we do it. It's just not done on a daily basis. It's usually just to the distributors, but it's not unheard of, and it's doable. It's just, yeah.
Adding them onto the policy and no extra cost.
No. There's no extra cost for insureds on the policy, and there's no extra cost for those rights period endorsements. And I've got some policies where you've got 30 additional insureds on a big feature film because you've got all your foreign sales, you've got a bunch of financiers involved, and it just keeps going and going. So there's no additional cost.
Great. So here's another question. We had E&O insurance kindly waived by a big institute we were filming inside of when we first started production. Since then, we haven't been asked for it. Is this common for do-it-yourself filmmakers? Is it a bad idea for us to reply on?
I'm not sure I understand. Yes, some locations require that you have E&O insurance before they'll let you film. But it's not normal. And I'll tell you, Universal Studios is one of them. Most of their production, they want to go film on their lot in place.
Interesting.
Certain types of productions. And then, like, I've seen it done at, like, museums and where you've got artwork and things like that. They want you to have E&O. But I don't understand the second part of the question. So it isn't unheard of. It's good that they waived it if you didn't need it. But I don't know what is it. It's not common. It's not common to need E&O for a location, but it is. It has before. So yes.
But once you get to distribution, you would still need to get E&O insurance. So
correct. But
it's good to get waived for the early part. Yeah.
Yeah. For filming on a location, I have seen where certain locations require that you have the E&O prior to them letting you film on their property. But it's not normal.
Yeah.
No.
Good to know, though. Here's from Suzanne. She was talking about getting, production insurance in time of COVID. So she's telling us a little bit more about her production. It's a single location, 5 actors, no stunts, etc. $600K private funding. It's a 2-week shoot following protocols. How challenging is that to cover now? A short-term policy is possible?
We could do a short term for that. Yeah, absolutely, under $1 million. But I have one insurance company that would do all of the coverage. So they would give you cast coverage and everything on a feature film. I just submitted one to them today that was $650,000. So $600,000. Most of the insurance companies don't like them that small that write the majority of these coverage. But we have one market that will do it, including cast coverage. If you don't want cast coverage and you want to keep it bare boned, we can do it on a short term, but that's under 30 days. So now it's not going to, it will cover you while you're filming, but what it won't do is you won't have coverage on that negative through post-production if it goes past 30 days.
Okay, that's good to know. And further questions, again, Stacie is available and has kindly shared her contact information with us. Here's a question from Sean. Is workers' comp required for micro budget productions in Chicago?
Well, I don't know what Illinois' laws are, but if it's like most of the country, again, it doesn't matter if you've got, unless you're filming on your own or you're as the owner of a company, you're not required to have workers' comp on yourself. But if you are bringing people on to work for you, then you should have workers' comp. You would need to call maybe the Work Comp Bureau and find out if they've got something different. But again, it doesn't matter what the budget is. It's if you've got somebody showing up, you're telling them what their job is. You're required to have workers' comp on them. And I'm sure that's in Illinois just like it is in the other states. But maybe they've got waivers that they do for certain things. I don't know. I would have each state is different.
So type in workers' comp Illinois, Illinois state, and you should get something. Yeah.
Yeah. Workers' Comp Bureau.
Here's from Workers' Comp Bureau. Thank you. Here's a question from Mabel. Hi, Mabel. I know her from California. How do we deal with home movie rights sold by a company that sells them? They don't provide rights, but only sell the footage. I've also heard that home movies do not have to be covered rights. And if I find a YouTube home video that I want to use and I try to contact that owner, but I can't find the owner, how do I handle this?
I'm just an insurance broker. That would definitely be a lawyer question. I wish I could answer it, but I don't know the answer. This is definitely something why you need a lawyer involved when you're dealing with E&O and rights and all of that stuff. There's a bunch of law firms that do nothing but they would probably know this question off the top of their head. I just don't. It's definitely a lawyer question.
Would that be the same lawyers that do deal with fair use and that kind of thing?
Correct.
Yeah.
Don Calif we deal with all the time.
Yeah.
There's a handful of them that do this all the time.
Great. And we'll send some names of those law firms that, Donaldson, Calif, et cetera, that deal specifically with this kind of.
I have a list. I have a list that I can send you that's got maybe 3 or 4 other.
Oh, excellent. And we'll include that tomorrow when we send a copy of the webinar.
Okay.
Jennifer Smith, you mentioned that if you're shooting outside of the U.S., you need foreign insurance. Does your company handle that? And what does the process look like?
Definitely do it all the time. It really is just there's a spreadsheet we need from you. We'll need to know what your shoot schedule is, and then there's a spreadsheet for the foreign workers comp that it really is your listings. Who's leaving the U.S., who's leaving, and who's all going into the country you're going to film. So, say for example, you've got 5 people coming from the U.S. to go into Italy, and you've got 3 UK people going into Italy. I need their name. We need their names, what their position is, their travel dates, and then we get a quote. It generally is minimum premium of $2,500 though for that.
Okay, that's great to know. I have a kind of complicated question as a follow-up. Is I was working on a production shot in Somalia. It was a Swedish production company. I was a producer for hire. And there were several Americans, a DP, and a couple other people working on that production on the ground in Somalia. And would we need to get some kind of special, would that Swedish production company need to have some special production insurance to cover the Americans?
Yeah.
Or, okay.
Yeah, they should. Well, I don't know what they can get out of Sweden, but if they couldn't get you, that would be somewhere I would say call me, talk it through, see what Sweden can provide. And if not, then we would step in and help from the U.S. end.
Yeah.
But if they're, you know, if
Okay,
they're
that's great. So that's
hiring you, they should be providing the coverage. Absolutely.
great. Okay, yeah, because it's kind of it was a
a lot of
complicated situation, and yeah.
a lot of other countries, their insurance is worldwide on liability, but U.S. and Canada is not. So sometimes, you know, the Swedish may have a worldwide general liability policy already. They may not have to buy a foreign package like we do here.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
great. So that's a kind of like that's a perfect
Yeah,
example of a great follow-up question for you.
yeah, that would be one of those again. We'd just talk it through and say, let's see what they've got out of Sweden, and we'll go from there.
Great. Yeah, because every production is unique unto itself, as we all know. Here's from Jen. If you get E&O in advance, and then the contract with the distributor wants higher limits, is it easy just to switch the policy and up the policy?
Yeah, yeah. They may want a known loss letter, meaning, okay, we're going to increase it, but they want to make sure you haven't had any claims. So they may just make you sign a known loss letter, and then we can increase it. And then, of course, you'll pay the premium for the increased limits. We do that. It's not unheard of at all for somebody to buy a 1 million, 3 million policy, and then HBO picks it up, and we have to increase it to 5 million.
Okay, great. This is from Malky. When I worked on fiction features, daily shoot reports, call sheets, sign-in sheets, footage logs, etc., were necessary in order to maintain insurance coverage. For independent documentaries, where the shooting environment and frequency look a lot different, what kind of documentation is required in the case that an insurance claim becomes, that an insurance claim becomes necessary? Do you need those call logs? Do you need the call sheets, etc.?
They'll need whatever you have. So the call sheets definitely are different for documentaries than they are for like a scripted feature film or TV series where you've got daily call sheets and notes are made on those things every day. So just whatever you have, documentation you have. They'll always want the original schedule. So that's definitely something that's important. They'll always want the original budget. And then, like one of them I'm dealing with right now, because due to COVID, they're just starting back up at the end of the month. So they're trying to get in advance on their claim because they need some funds, but the claim can't be settled until they actually start filming. So now you're going to say, okay, we're back up and running. Here's what our downtime was, and here's what all the extra expenses were. So it's going to be, you know, and then they're going to want the backup, typical invoices, whether it's the vendors or, you know, crew. Payroll stuff. So it's the same. It's just, I know it's different, but whatever backup you have is what they're going to want. Whether it's the original budget and schedule, and then any backup invoicing that was done that you incurred extra expenses for.
Great. Next question is, what does the use of quote unquote likeness mean?
Well, the use of likeness is a documentary, and you're doing interviews, and you didn't get a release from somebody. It was an unauthorized use of likeness. Their likeness has gone up on screen.
So they're on film or video, now in perpetuity. Their likeness, we can see them in that film or that screen. So personal releases are of utmost importance and
that's what it would be.
In getting E&O.
Yeah, and you get that sometimes. We'll get those, and that's why if you're doing, this is another thing on E&O that's a tip. Crowd scenes, like if you're filming on the streets of Manhattan, you can't necessarily get a release from everybody walking by. So you do postings that are all over the place.
Yes,
we are filming here. You are authorizing us to film you. So that's an operation.
And have one of your camera people get a shot of of those postings.
Yes. So that's what the unauthorized use of likeness is somebody being shown on camera that didn't give they didn't give you the authority to use them.
Great. And we only have about 15 more minutes, but we have lots of questions, so we'll try to get to everybody. If we don't, we'll get the question answered and get it and send it out with all of our follow-up tomorrow. So this is from Miko. What would an independent documentary filmmaker need to provide to a lawyer to clear the chain of title, et cetera, to get E&O? If she had used a substantial amount of materials in the public domain, would she need to provide a log? Would hard copies of the printed documentation that is not copyrighted as proof of public domain also be needed?
That's another lawyer question. I would have assumed that the lawyers are looking at the whole production. So I know that I get sometimes a clip log and the opinion letter, and 20% of that's not even going to be in the final cut. So they're looking at everything that could possibly go into the production. So I don't know what the lawyer requires. That would be a question for one of the law firms.
Great.
My opinion was the clip log was coming from the lawyer. So that means he's looking at the law. I mean, looking at the production.
Yeah, and generally the lawyers would look at the whole film and any footage that you want to flag to them. So next from Thomas, I have a documentary series with a sizable finishing graphics, music cues, and archival budget. Any underages would go back to the network. The broker I have communicated want those in the line items, the line numbers to in full to factor in the gross budget, regardless if they were spent. Comments on that?
I'm trying to understand it. I'm reading it myself again. Okay. Sizable,
yeah,
so sizable finishing, meaning there's no more filming. Graphics, music cues, and archival. Okay. And any underages would go back to the network. Oh. Yeah, this sometimes gets complicated if the original footage is not insured, the original filming. And with explain what about ATL and BTL categories should factor into the quote. Well, normally on any documentary, you are looking at the gross production cost, so it's full above the line and below the line. But with something like this, it's a little bit more complicated. If everything's been shot and now you're purchasing insurance, I can do it. It's really getting a lot more detail. I wish I could just answer this in a general way, but I would need a lot more detail about the production, if it was insured elsewhere at some point. And if you're only wanting to cover your post cost to finish it, I've done that before too, though. So I don't know if they're looking for you to give them the full gross production cost from when the production originally filmed or not. So a little bit more complicated, but I'm available if you want to talk about it specifically.
Great. Next is for a low budget documentary. We need to shoot a few reenactments in South Asia. Do we need specific insurance there to be able to get E&O here?
No, the E&O is worldwide. It doesn't matter where you shoot. The actual general liability coverage and workers' comp and auto liability is only U.S. and Canada if you purchase it here. E&O is worldwide, so it doesn't matter if you're filming there for E&O.
Great. And can you repeat the DICE, D-I-C-E definition again?
Yeah, documentary, industrial, commercial, and educational. That's the acronym for it, but it also includes webisodes and music videos.
Great, thank you. Here's from Raphael. I'm a producer for indie films for low budget productions, but approximately 200,000. How much approximately should I add onto my budget for E&O? And Thomas is, Raphael, I'm sorry, is this documentary or fiction? I think we need to, I think for documentary average is, 3,000,
Yeah.
more or less.
Correct.
Yeah, and if you want to add on to that question, we'll try to answer it.
Yeah, for low budget films, the E&O is for low budget films is the features. It's usually around the same. That's that $3,000 mark.
Yeah. It's from Susan. What is a typical E&O timeline from application to completion, assuming all the elements are in place? So how long, once you do the application, you send it to you, how long does it take?
Depends on the insurance company because I don't quote them. I can get them usually from one insurance company turned around in 24 to 48 hours, the quote. The other insurance companies sometimes will take a week or so.
Great. That's still pretty quick. So that's
Yeah,
great.
that's on E&O. That's not on production insurance right now. Production insurance is taking a long time because they are, very much looking at your locations, budget, everything as far as even writing them. And some insurance companies, upper management has to approve for them to release a quote. So things like production insurance is taking longer.
Great. Next question is it safe for a filmmaker to no longer maintain E&O insurance? Is it ever safe for a film that was released, say in 2011, has no claims, for example, it's been seen? Should we keep maintaining coverage?
Well, the E&O policies, most of them here anyway, are on an occurrence basis. So if you had E&O for the first 3 years on the film that it was shown, the coverage still will continue because it's the occurrence was the actual dissemination of it. The only issue is that if you don't renew, we can't add additional distributors after a policy is expired.
Okay, great. From Joanne, I completed 99% of shooting on my documentary. We're in editing and post-production. Do I still need E&O insurance? If you're planning to distribute, yes?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't, again, we talked about the E&O is not necessarily needed when you're filming, especially if it's some type of small, feature film or small VOD type production. So that doesn't have anything to do with the E&O. You will need it when you're ready to distribute it.
Great. So not until, 99, what did you say, 95% of documentaries get it when they're completed or ready to start film festivals or
Correct.
to be broadcast.
Or they've got their distributor and, it's been sitting on the shelf for 2 years, but they finally got a distributor. So they'll come to us and say, okay, we've got our agreement. Let's get the E&O in place.
Okay. And then Thomas asked his question again. I think we tried to answer it, but you might follow up in a, Menasha is, this is a follow-up question. The small budget with a few actors, they're filming in Ackworth, Georgia on her 2-acre farmhouse property. So it's a low budget, small film. I guess production insurance it's going to be I don't remember, Menashe, if it was 2 weeks, or maybe this is a follow-up email to STACIE directly.
Yeah, I mean,
here's another question.
Yeah, I don't know what the question is. I mean, it doesn't matter where you're filming. You still need the same coverages, and it just depends on what your threshold is as far as premiums.
Yeah, I think a follow-up email might be good. I'm going to try to get to as many questions as possible. STACIE, are you available for like a couple more minutes, 5 more minutes or so?
Sure, 5 more minutes is perfect. Thanks.
Okay, there was some discussion about various governments like Quebec stepping up with stopgap insurance. Can you comment on that?
Yes, I can, because we've got 3 Canadian offices.
During COVID, yeah.
Yeah, we'll start with that. The Canadian, and forgive me because I'm not in Canada. There's the Motion Picture Association up there, and the Canadian government are looking to put together, I was thinking $150 million fund for COVID. They're hoping to have it done. They're hoping to have it done by August. Now, here in the U.S., there's already 2 bills out. A senator from California, one from New York, have both put bills up. But I don't know how long that's going to take. It's the same thing that they did after 9/11 with terrorism insurance, and that took 18 months. And I said, this industry can't wait 18 months, so hopefully it'll get put through quicker. But there is something here in the U.S. actually up in the government also for a backstop, a government fund for COVID coverage. But again, we just don't know how long that's going to take. We're hoping it will be sooner rather than later.
Great. Here's from Alva. At what stage of production should we make contact to get insurance? Because it seems like you need specific details such as when we're shooting, so we need to know all of that beforehand. I think this is probably for a documentary. So
Yeah, I mean, if you've got a budget, and even if you don't have your shoot dates, if you've got a tentative schedule, like the number of days you're going to shoot, potential locations. Right now with COVID, it's a little more detailed they want on locations. Before, I could have just said, you could have told me you're filming in the United States, and that would have been enough, that we're not filming foreign, and I could got a quote. But if you have a general idea, I've got one we were quoting that was going back and forth between Georgia and the Carolinas. So we were able to get quotes by doing that. Now they've nailed it down to Georgia. But generally, if you've got, again, a number of shoot days, a budget, and I need a full budget, and general vicinity of where you're filming, we can get quotes. And a lot of times my clients will come to me just asking, they're putting their budget together. And if we can kind of go through, I can try to give some estimates for budgeting figures too.
that's a great idea. I mean, we had a webinar about a year or year and a half ago with a wonderful industry accountant, and who suggested, as you're putting things together, involve your lawyer and your accountant. And it sounds like the production broker is also could be a third element to, as you're putting all this together, your budget and your whole production plan. It couldn't hurt to talk to all three of them, maybe even sometimes together. I don't know, maybe that's overkill, but certainly these things will help you, sooner than later.
Well, I can tell you, everybody's a little shell-shocked right now because they may have done their budgets the end, say, end of 2019 or beginning of this year, and now they're wanting to proceed forward, and they're way under budgeted on insurance now.
Yeah,
because the whole world changed starting in March. So they're definitely, most production budgets I'm looking at right now are way under budgeted on insurance.
Wow. Okay, that is very good to know. And here's our last question for the day. Can I get insurance for all original footage that was shot? It's now on a drive. And it sounds like maybe you're ready to edit. Oh, there's a couple more questions too. Let's see if there's anything.
I'm sorry.
Do you have any questions? Should I repeat that?
Yeah, I'm looking for it. I'm looking for questions too, but I'm not seeing that one.
So Sandy, her film is finished. She's completely shot it. Can I get insurance for all the original footage that was shot? It's now on a drive. Sandy, did you have production insurance prior, or maybe not? Or
that's going to be similar to the one that's going to do just post. I would need to discuss it to figure it out.
Okay.
Yeah, it would be one of those.
So maybe it's.
And what coverage you're talking about? Yeah.
Exactly. And then Tiffany's asking if Women Make Movies has a list of recommended accountants. We can certainly send you that as well tomorrow. I'll see if we do have it. I think so. So Stacie, this was incredibly informative. Thank you so much for your time. I hope you're not completely talked out. And thank you for sharing your information and your contact information for follow-up, your expertise. Everybody, again, will be sending you a copy of this webinar tomorrow with Stacie's slides.
And I'll get and law firms. I'll send you the list of law firms when we get off the call here.
Law firms, great. And then we'll have some accountants, and also we'll have some, links pertaining to production protocol, whether you're doing a scripted or a documentary. But in the meantime, everybody stay safe, stay healthy. Our next webinar is going to be August 11th, and again, it's a first time subject matter that we've covered for Women Make Movies. We're having two very extraordinary women. They're both composers, musicians, award-winning. Miriam Cutler, who's done a slew of films, is very, very well known in the documentary world. including she did the music for RBG, etc. And then we also have Florencia Di Concilio, who's an Uruguayan musician and composer who lives in Paris. And they both work both in the US and internationally. So that should be a very interesting and informative discussion about how to compose and work with music in your film. And again, Stacie, thank you so much for today. I learned an incredible amount, and I hope everybody else did too. Thanks, and everybody stay safe.
You too. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.